Welcome to this 30-minute News 2 special on the Right to Die debate. I'm Mark Kelly, and we start with legislative efforts here in Tennessee to legalize medically assisted suicide. News 2 State Capitol reporter Tori Gessner spoke with Nashville Representative Bob Freeman, who is sponsoring a bill, and learned what helped motivate this proposal.
It's a helpless feeling watching a loved one suffer in pain until the end. Representative Bob Freeman had heard about it when his friend's parents were dying. Then he felt it firsthand with his own grandmother.
She looked at me one day and she's like, I'm ready to go. And her only solution was to stop eating, stop taking her medicine.
It was a slow and painful death Freeman says could have been avoided by medically assisted suicide, a literal life and death decision he believes should be a right for terminally ill Tennesseans if they choose.
It's not for people that are in a dark place or, having drug addiction problems or mentally ill. These are people that are never going to get up and walk out of the hospital again, and we should be able to help them die with dignity.
That's why Freeman is sponsoring a bill to legalize medically assisted suicide in Tennessee, which is currently a Class D felony. Right now, 10 states and Washington, D.C. allow the practice. Opponents argue it goes against a doctor's promise to do no harm, and it could promote suicide as a solution. But Freeman views it differently.
These are people that are not going to get better, where medicine has done what it can for them, and we should allow them to pass peacefully as opposed to keep them alive for another six months in pain.
Under Freeman's bill, a doctor would have to sign off that the patient has a terminal illness with 6 or fewer months to live. The patient would be the only one who could make the decision to die. Then, a psychologist or psychiatrist would need to confirm they're of sound mind.
Somebody would come in and have a conversation with them to make sure that this is exactly actually what they want to do. They're not being coerced. There's tons of checks and balances.
And if a patient changed their mind, they'd have an out at any time. Freeman sponsored the bill last year, and despite some support, it never made it out of committee. He hopes this legislative session is different, and the compassion the bill could bring overshadows any potential controversy. In Nashville, Tori Gessner, News 2.
Well, support for aid in dying legislation depends on how the question is asked. New polls show a majority of Americans supporting the idea, but include the word suicide in that poll, and that support drops. I had a chance to talk with a Tennessee group that says no matter what you call this, the practice of suicide is not and should not be legal.
If you polled 100 people would be against suicide. This is the same idea. It's just couched in more comfortable terms for people to digest, but it's suicide. Will
Brewer says no matter what title you give it, aid in dying or physician-assisted suicide, the practice should be illegal in the U.S. An attorney and lobbyist for Tennessee Right to Life, his group devotes many resources to protecting life in the womb. But he also sees great importance protecting the final moments of life as well.
So it's frustrating, the misinformation and the kind of let's make this a romantic idea for people when all we're doing is helping people die.
Brewer says physician-assisted suicide is in direct conflict with doctors' Hippocratic Oath, which has guided medical ethics for thousands of years, instructing doctors to do no harm to their patients. A new Gallup poll shows that 71% of Americans say a doctor should be able to painlessly end a patient's life at their request. But when pollsters tweak the question and include the word suicide, support drops to 66%.
There are plenty of people in our corner, but it's all about just protecting life. We keep people from committing suicide when they're healthy. Why are we going to aid somebody in suicide in a different scenario? If suicide is wrong in one, it's wrong in the other.
A Tennessee group called Christian Medical and Dental Associations opposes aid in dying legislation as well, writing that the Christian physician, above all, should be obedient to biblical teaching and sensitive to the counsel of the Christian community. The group warns that physician-assisted suicide opens a dangerous door to financial incentives for a premature death, feelings of pressure or coercion from doctors and family for a patient to end their life early, giving someone the legal power to kill, and harming doctor-patient trust. For Brewer, whether you call it physician-assisted suicide or aid in dying, He stands firm that the practice goes against the natural order of things.
If you're pro-life across the board, then I don't think this idea is going to gain traction anytime soon, no. And we pray that it doesn't.
While Tennessee lawmakers continue debating whether terminally ill patients have the right to choose medically assisted suicide, one state recently moved to make sure it does not happen, and voters had a say in it. News 2's Tori Gessner looks at the impact of a narrowly passed constitutional amendment in West Virginia.
It's a deeply personal decision some Tennessee lawmakers are pushing to make legal this legislative session.
Other states have allowed for dignity in death and allowed people, as they enter in the last stage of life, choose to medically end their life at that moment.
Medically assisted suicide aims to give terminally ill patients death with dignity. 10 states and Washington, D.C. currently allow it. Last year, West Virginia became the first to constitutionally ban it.
An important part of the pro-life movement is ensuring life is protected from conception to natural death. And this is just another tool in the toolkit for that.
Last March, on the last night of the legislative session, West Virginia lawmakers passed a resolution to let voters decide whether to ban medically assisted suicide in the state's constitution.
There could be a court that decides that there is a right to, for example, to commit suicide using a physician. And what this does is that it enshrines it in the state constitution that that kind of activity is going to be prohibited going into the future.
The constitutional amendment bans someone from participating, quote, in the practice of medically assisted suicide, euthanasia, or mercy killing of a person. But critics argued that was already illegal under West Virginia law.
It's very bizarre that they're trying to constitutionally stop it, because this would be the first state in the country to ever do that, ever.
In November, that's exactly what happened. But barely. Voters passed the ban by less than a single percentage point, or less than 6,000 votes.
I'm as pro-life as I can possibly get. I think listening to the great people of West Virginia, letting them make the decisions and everything is always a smart money to us.
Critics continued to push back.
Restoring reproductive freedom. We feel that the people of West Virginia should be able to vote on that, but the Republicans won't let us vote on it because they know what the outcome will be, just like in every other state. So instead, they put this meaningless constitutional amendment on that's banning something that's already banned.
Back in Tennessee, assisted suicide is a Class D felony. Lawmakers will again consider legalizing the measure this session, potentially drawing a line between politics and what's personal. In Nashville, Tori Gessner, News 2.
Still to come, Cindy Siegel-Shepler. Hear the lengths that she went to so she could end her life on her terms. Welcome back. The few states in the U.S. that allow physician-assisted death have strict rules, and Tennessean Cindy Siegel-Shepler did not qualify. But that did not stop her from getting on a plane and traveling thousands of miles to end her life on her own terms. I had a chance to speak with Cindy's sister, also a good friend of hers, about that heart-wrenching decision. When Cindy Siegel-Shepler decided to end her life using assisted dying, Ryan Pryor was one of the few she confided in.
So she was going to kind of plan her next step. She said that in a vague but ominous enough way that I kind of figured out what she meant.
Cindy and Ryan becoming friends seemed unlikely. Ryan, a young man living in Atlanta, launching his career in health advocacy and journalism. Cindy, a middle-aged married woman in Knoxville, forced to leave her career decades earlier because of crippling disease. What could these two possibly have in common? Turns out, quite a bit.
Chronic fatigue syndrome is the condition that we both had.
Also called myalgic encephalomyelitis, or ME/CFS, it's an illness that causes severe tiredness and harms its victims both mentally and physically.
And I had gone to about 16 different doctors and a neurologist, a rheumatologist, infectious disease, on down this list.
Cindy first heard about Ryan through a health documentary that he produced about the disease called Forgotten Plague.
And it's really hard because doctors don't really know. I mean, they sit there and say, we're just guessing.
Confident that Ryan could help her advocate for more research funding, Cindy called him out of the blue to introduce herself.
She called me and she said, Ryan, I'm your biggest fan. And that was also a little little bit of a red flag. So I was like, that doesn't, what is she talking about?
That first cold call turned into countless warm conversations over the years.
We became friends through that process. When I would tell my friends about her, I would sort of say something like, she's like my godmother.
But in 2019, Ryan had one phone call with Cindy that was unlike any other.
She had said, definitely please come visit me in Knoxville, and it's better that you come sooner rather than later. Once I got there, she and her husband confided in me what was actually going to happen, and they talked. They had a lot more seriousness, and they were more comfortable talking about it in person.
Cindy had made her decision. She was flying to Switzerland, one of the first countries in the world to allow assisted dying, in order to end her suffering.
I sat with Cindy for about an hour with a tape recorder on, and I had made a list of questions I was going to ask her, and we basically called this like her exit interview from life. It was certainly one of the most kind of maybe like sacred conversations that I've ever had.
And I think she was scared a lot the last few months.
Peggy Siegel Laughlin is Cindy's sister. The two grew up so close in age they nicknamed themselves litter pups. But Cindy's autoimmune health was fragile from a young age.
She was the only one that struggled with her health from the beginning.
Peggy learned about her sister's wish to end her life just days before her flight to Europe.
She says, I've tried everything to improve my health, and there's nothing for me right now. There will be in the future. These arrangements had been made. I mean, I knew there was nothing I could say. I think she did what she wanted to do. And I'm okay with it.
December 16, 2019 in Switzerland, Cindy ended her life after 62 years, while her friends and family ensure her message about assisted dying lives on.
She absolutely, positively did not in any way feel that medical aid in dying was remotely related to suicide, as much as some people might have their own ideas about that. That was her feeling.
If her story continues to be used, she would definitely be smiling from up above.
Ryan Pryor later wrote Cindy's story for CNN. He also published a book about COVID called The Long Haul, which he dedicated to his friend, Cindy. Well, still to come, John J. Hooker, a big Tennessee personality who tried to change the law before he died. Hear from those who were by his side as he pushed for change.